Come on. All right. Welcome everybody to the October 16th COD Defense Serverless Working Group call. Let's see, 6 people so far. Okay. Let's jump right into it. I believe this one's still on hold. Okay, KubeCon, EU next year. The main CFP deadline, I believe, was earlier this week. However, the CFP for the maintainer track sessions, I believe, ends December 14th, and they just opened it up yesterday, I believe. Here's a link to information about it. If you are planning on going or would like to represent us, please let us know. So we're looking for volunteers to represent our working group here. Just to give you some background, the main focus, at least recently, has been on X registry. So you need to feel comfortable talking about it. You don't need to be an expert in it. You just need to be able to make it sound like you know what you're talking about. And we will help prep you if you're not one of the normal X registry folks. We also will sometimes give a brief, like 5 minute refresher, or not refresher, but a status of where Cloud Events is, which is usually nothing's changed in a while, and that's about it. So it's really, really quick. As I said, most of it is about X registry. So as I said, we're looking for volunteers. Obviously, if you're based in the EU, you're more likely going to be going there. So be kind of looking in the EU direction or EU folks' direction for people to volunteer. Okay. We have a little bit of time, so guess what? About 2 months before we actually have to submit the CFP. So just let me know either offline or during one of these calls if you are interested. I believe we have done this with 1 or 2 people. I think 3 people might be pushing it just because I think most of these sessions are about 35 minutes, and having 3 speakers in 35 minutes might be kind of tight. So usually 1 or 2 people handle these things, but we can adjust as necessary depending on who wants to volunteer. Okay. I should also say, aside from the maintainer track session, the lightning talks and stuff like that, I think those have a December 14th date as well for those CFP type things. So if you want to do a lightning talk related to our work, not necessarily even about cloud event or X registry, maybe about cloud events or something like that, um, feel free to speak up or even just submit one. I don't think you necessarily have to go through us, but for a maintainer track session, because it's sort of representing the group in some sort of official capacity, that probably does need to go through the group. Okay. All right. Any
Yeah,
questions,
last year
comments?
in Paris, I did both, by the way, but that was quite some work to prepare both. And
Yeah, I can imagine.
but the lightning talks, at least as I perceived them in Paris, they were a great opportunity to represent the project because that was a big room and was full with people.
Yeah.
So you
And with,
and a lot of people who hadn't heard about cloud events at all before.
yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah, that I think a lightning talk is a great opportunity to to put cloud events into people's minds that may not have heard about it. I don't think an entire 35-minute session on cloud events is worthy these days, given the state of the project. So, and just another side note, because we have had this in the past, um, for those people who are not old timers, so people who are either new to the project or are just new to the community in general, and I don't mean this working group community, but open source in general. Um, we have used this as an opportunity to let sort of newbies or younger folks get exposure to the conference and get practice presenting in front of people and stuff like that. So it's as a learning and growth opportunity for people who don't do this all the time. And again, we help them learn about the topic and stuff like that. So if you know of somebody who you think, hey, is on the right track for this stuff, who's going to make a great speaker one day, or just wants some practice in doing these things and is looking for an opportunity to present, we are definitely open to handing this off to somebody who isn't normally part of our group. That's happened in the past, and that's perfectly acceptable. Obviously, it'd be best if these had some background in the cloud events or X registry, but it's not necessarily a requirement. We definitely, for example, had somebody from I think Knative World who knows about cloud events but knew nothing about X registry, but felt comfortable enough talking about it in, I think it was in the China KubeCon a couple years ago. So just want to mention that in case you know somebody who you want to sort of help with their career. Okay. All right. With that, let's move forward. Let's talk about this week's X registry spec. Kind of a smaller one, and this mainly focuses on the messaging spec. Obviously, as usual, a lot of typos and cleanup type stuff. Clemens added some text in there to explain how the base message attribute, which is kind of like an inheritance or pointer type of thing that says, hey, this message is based upon this other message. So you're basically taking that base message and extending it in some way. And he felt like it needed some more explanation text around that, how that all works. So that's a little bit of text he added there. Doesn't actually change anything normatively in the spec, I don't believe. I think it's just more explanation text. And then he added a section about context attributes and talks about how they can be templates. So you can, for example, have variables in these string values that get filled in by the environment in which which is generating these messages. So for example, maybe you want to fill in maybe the subject field for an event or something like that if you're using cloud events. He talked a little bit about how that can all work. And then how you can also use these messages to sort of convert messages into from one format to another. So for example, let's say you have a message coming in without cloud events, but because that message definition has a cloud events section, which is unused on that incoming side, you can then say, oh, well, this message coming in maps to this message definition. I'm going to use the cloud events portion of that message definition and add the cloud event attributes to it. And then if he passes on that message, he can now pass it on in cloud events. So Clement added some little text around there to help people understand, hey, the message definition isn't just used for, matching purposes or stuff like that. You can actually use it to help construct these outgoing events and in some cases use them to transform events by changing for example, the envelope in which they're formatted or the protocol in which is being used as you bounce back and forth between protocols. Again, I don't think anything new normatively in there, just more explanation text. And then finally, we added a section that talks about why when we define the messaging spec, we do things like say, message definitions should only have one version, where, for example, schema docs can have multiple versions. And it may not be clear to people. So we added a section that explains the challenges that are involved when you have multiple message definitions, and then each message definition could have multiple versions. You get this sort of two-dimensional array of message definitions that you may try to match when you get an incoming message. And it's bad enough when you have multiple message definitions that might kind of look similar, but then imagine if each one of those then had multiple versions and they all look really, really similar at that point. Trying to do an exact match can be really, really problematic. So we decided to say, nope, max versions should be one. Now it's a should and not a must not, because there may be use cases where actually versioning may make sense, but we think that's a edge case scenario. So basically, we added a recommendation section that says, look, we're not going to mandate these things. They're all shoulds and should nots type statements, but we recommend that you use cloud events so you have well-defined metadata on these incoming messages. We recommend that the cloud event type match the message ID in the registry. So you could do a very quick lookup by just looking at the message ID type and finding the corresponding message ID. And then again, we talk about how max versions should be one to keep the matching mechanism as simple as possible. Okay. And then kind of related to that, we talk about how you can technically change a message definition without versioning it, but you should limit the changes to be just non-on-the-wire changes. So for example, you can change things like documentation, stuff like that, but changing fields that appear on the wire, that should not be done because you may break people. And that's sort of an obvious thing. We technically probably didn't need to say that, but just to hammer home the guidance that we were providing in this section, we decided to add that in there as well. Okay. Anyway, that's it for those changes. I don't think anything's normatively in there. I think all those things were there in the past. They just weren't explained completely to our satisfaction. Okay.
One thing I wanted to
Yeah.
comment on base message because I
Mhm.
think that's a really interesting concept, like, depending on how extend works. But you could also kind of make it duck typing as well. Like that could be another way where if it has these set of fields, it could be that essentially, right? Like it, and then if you need to extend it, you just take that base number of fields and then add one, and then and it still could be cast to that parent one because it has the necessary contract with those fields, but it could also be the other contract, if that makes sense. So that's a different way of thinking about it. It might be a good way depending on how base or how messages are used in general. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. Like you could think of it that way. The reason I was kind of pausing was I'm trying to think. We we don't go into a lot of details about the matching algorithm to say, hey, take this incoming message, then look at the fields. We hint that you might want to compare the incoming message headers, for example, with the attributes defined in the message definition. Maybe even sometimes you want to look at the schema of the incoming message and see if it matches the schema doc associated with the message definition, stuff like that. But we do it in a very, very vague way. You are right. We could probably say, yeah, there's deck typing, and so technically it maps to that base type. Um, let me talk about that with the guys offline because if we start talking in that language, I worry that we might be being a little too prescriptive on the matching algorithm side of things. But you do raise a good point that may be something worth mentioning to put in people's heads as an option that they could choose to do. So let me take a note and mention that offline in our phone call tomorrow. So
Okay.
hold on a minute. Okay, I got it written down. Cool. Thank you, Ben. Any other comments or questions? All right. Any objection to approving this week's PR? Cool. All right. Now, Ben, to yours. Would you like to, oh, sorry, wrong one. Would you like to share your screen or do you want to just talk to it? How do you want to work this discussion?
Yeah, I can just talk about it mostly because I have too many windows open and I would have to close them all. But
Okay.
yeah, let me just talk about it. So let me first give some context. So about 6 to 8 months ago, probably close to 8 months ago, we concluded that the verifiability proposal wasn't in the right spirit for cloud events. And so one of the major issues was adding additional fields, having it be more specific. And so we went back and we made it very specific to DSSE. So that's kind of the approach that we went with. And so the original solution allowed for any sort of attributes, extended attributes, attributes in general to be signed. But security told me that we should start simple first, and if they say no to this, then we can just add the the other portion to it. So Doug, so one of your comments was like, adding attributes. Like we thought, like I told security specifically that that's something that you guys want, but they just wanted to do something simple first. I'm like, okay, like that's fine, but I know they're gonna comment on this and that's something that they want, right? You guys have said it multiple times. So, but yeah, sorry, I kind of jumped ahead. So let me give the
Hmm.
summary. So with verifiability, the whole goal is that when someone sends an event, um, you should be able to know who's producing it, or you should be able to verify where it came from is the idea. And so originally when we did this, we kind of went with an agnostic algorithm, signing algorithm approach, which is what we did not want. Cloud events did not want. So we went ahead and made a specific DSSE one. So now this uses the DSSE signing algorithm to handle verification. And we introduce, I think it's just one new attribute, which is the signature. And we give some examples of what that would look like and how the SHA-256 is computed for the signature. Um, and and yeah, so it's not that much different. It's just basically more specific. And one thing I do want to call out for verifiability, we do make some comments that, we aren't for this isn't a proposal um, you know, to prevent attacks with like deduplicate or duplications and like DDoS. Like it's not in that vein. It's only for verifiability. So I just wanted to call that out because I know sometimes when people are reading this, those questions do pop up in their head. But yeah, so please take a look. But like I said, the signature's pretty simple. It's just a bunch of SHA-256s, and then you stick that in the DSSE envelope, and that's pretty much the gist of it. And what I plan on doing, based off of your comment, Doug, was adding the support for the basic being able to add attributes, et cetera, et cetera. But one of your comments was like almost an audit trail, if you will, of like signatures. Um, the reason why we pushed back against that is because that there's something called Biscuit, which I wasn't aware of when I did the first proposal. There's a Biscuit protocol that allows for signatures to be like a historical history of signatures that like allows you to move forward or move backwards, and like undoes the payload essentially, and then eventually you get, once you get to the end, if you verify the last thing that you have, then it's completely verified. So because I wanted to keep this proposal simple, which it just focuses on the signature or the verifiability aspect of it, if we need to add like, where additional proxies or middle services are adding some sort of information, then we would need a separate proposal for something like Biscuit, where it allows for that rolling back, if you will, and verifying of signatures. So that's something that I just wanted to call out there. With that, I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of the gist of the proposal. And like I said, it isn't complicated. It was mostly just getting approval from security. That's what took so long. So, but we have it approved, and yeah, so that's kind of the gist of things. And we do have I want to demo it, but that's also getting approved as well. So once I get that approved, we can also demo it using the Cloud Events SDK, and then showing it being sent to one service or to another service, verifying it, then sending it to another. So we have a demo that does that whole like transition that you guys will be able to see as well. So hopefully I should be able to have that soon too.
Okay, cool. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Ben? Nothing?
Was
Okay.
this
Oh, go
the
ahead.
proposal that I seem to remember thinking it's going to be awkward to implement in SDKs because you need to be able to read the whole stream in its sort of original bytes and then parse it as JSON or whatever? I have vague memories. It could be an entirely
Yes,
different
yes.
proposal. Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of the same concept. Yeah, so this is kind of based on very similar ideas there. Just um that this one is specific. So that's the main difference.
Right. So I still suspect it would be tricky to implement. That doesn't mean it's bad at all. Just, a concern.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And in addition to that, depending on how because like I said, we have the original the the main issue. So I'm gonna say what the main issue with parsing or deserialization is time. Like time is actually the biggest issue. Well, there's other ones as well. Like if you're reading time and you serialize or you deserialize something, then you serialize something and you potentially change the data, then that's why it becomes a little bit more difficult to if you then verify it after the fact, because you have to reserialize it and then verify. So that's kind of, I think that's what you're talking about, John, or I might have misunderstood like why you
It
wanted to
was that
serialize.
so in .NET, for example, we can just deserialize by passing the incoming stream to something that spits out JSON. We would have to copy the whole thing into memory because it might be coming over the network or whatever. Copy something into memory so that we can read it twice, once to hash it and once to
Oh, I see what you're saying.
deserialize it.
Yeah, I imagine .NET, mind you, I have no experience with .NET, but I do love C Sharp. But I imagine that you guys have a reader, like a SHA-256 reader, where you could just put in the byte stream into that and pipe it and have like a pipe mechanism that pipes it from SHA-256 to.
If it's as simple as that, if we only need to if we don't need to interpret the bytes at all, um, then yes, I have implemented that for something else.
Yeah.
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 Okay, that's
Okay,
good
that
to know.
should work. Yeah, that should work.
Is that, well, wait, refresh my memory. Do you allow extensions? You must allow extension attributes, right?
Yeah, so that's the comment that I was mentioning. So we are going to allow for it. I tried to argue that we should have it in the initial proposal, but I lost that argument, unfortunately. And so I implemented it, but basically we're gonna have a commit later today where maybe later today, maybe it might be tomorrow, but where it would allow for extension attributes and to add any sort of attributes willy-nilly if you so choose. You just have to sign the thing. But how it's going to work is that you just have an array of the order at which you sign things.
Yeah, because I was thinking in
So
order,
when so coming back to we're not just hashing all the bytes of the thing. We only need to hash some bits, which means that the stream processor needs to be keeping track of some things. I need to look at this in more detail, basically.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
sounds like it may well still be fiddly. That's not an objection, just a comment.
yeah, that's
Right,
why I
right, right.
asked about the extensions, John, because Ben, your comment about, oh, just pass it into a streaming hash thing. It's like, well, not really. If you need to understand the bytes in some way, then it's not
Right.
just a streaming hash thing. Yeah.
If it needs to be context aware. And
Yes.
does that then, oh, and potentially for different formats, it needs to be aware of how each thing is represented in different formats? Or does this only apply to JSON anyway?
It could be anything typically, but we chose JSON, so it would just be JSON for the signature, at least for the DSSE protocol. But it could be gRPC, for example.
But well, so we have a cloud event can be in multiple different formats. Are you saying that if it's represented as the as yet unapproved XML format or the protobuf format, then it can't be signed?
No, no, it could be signed. It would just be that the DSSE portion of it, like this. So let me see
Yeah,
if I can find
that being
the
effectively a JSON
material.
string is
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
But it
that's it.
means
Yeah,
if something needs to be able to hash some bits and not others, and then when serializing, and then when deserializing, hash some bits and not others, that definitely means it needs to be aware of the format and like all kinds of things.
yeah. I mean, I definitely see the point. Like, yeah, it's definitely what I said was incorrect. Assuming that if we did sign everything, that was just over the wire. But if it allows for like you to be selective, then that's a little bit more of an issue. I can think about that some, but you could still implement it, but it's a little bit wonky. Like you would need to go through like the JSON parser and then fork there, which is really ugly.
Right.
So I don't like
And
that. But
and
yeah,
potentially you wouldn't even know which bits you had to hash if the thing that says what fields are in the signature is the last thing, then you can't hash as you go along because you don't know what you're meant to hash until you get to the end, unless you
right,
keep
right.
a per field.
I,
Yeah, no,
I wonder. Okay, let me think about it some more. But I wonder if we could get away just by using the values because it's already an array of keys. I wonder if we can get away with that. That way, like as you're just receiving the values of the matcher, you can just then hash that. I wonder if that works.
I would
Okay,
I
let
would
me think.
imagine I would imagine you'd need the names to be part of the hash.
I think so, but I need to think about it more.
But
Let me
but
try
I,
to
but I,
think about this from an implementation detail or an implementation of the SDK, because we just implemented it based off of this, which doesn't have that problem. So yeah.
Yeah, but Ben,
Um,
but the path you're headed on of take the value of the name, the value of the value, and hash those together outside of the format, I think is the right way to go with this. That way, the format of which this thing is sent is almost irrelevant to the signing mechanism.
Yeah. No, and yeah, I agree. And that's why like I said, I haven't really thought through that portion too much. But let me think about that some more. And I think that will make it easy for you too, John, when you implement. Like it's still gonna be a little wonky, but I think that will be easier.
Possibly.
Um, yeah, let me think about it. And I'll try thinking about how I would implement this. Um, from from an SDK. I mean, like, yeah, from an SDK point of view. And if it's easy, then I think we've won. But I'm just using like Go, like the Go SDK. So but if I'm able to do this, like if I notice that there's some difficulties, then I know I'm probably not heading in the right direction for implementation. But that's definitely a good call out. Because you definitely don't want to have like, yeah, reading the payload twice is not good. So that's not what we want to do. So let me definitely think about that. I'll have an answer for you all tomorrow probably because I want to think about it a little before I give a concrete answer. And then I'll post it both in the Slack channel and as well as in the PR.
Yep, that sounds great. Okay, actually, do me a favor. Paste it only in the PR. That way there's only
Okay.
one source of, there's only one
Truth.
thread. I don't want to have diverging threads. One in Slack and one in
Fair.
the PR.
That's a good call out. Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and do that.
Okay,
That's
cool.
probably a good point for me to drop, I'm afraid, folks. So
Yep.
see you next
Okay.
week.
Okay, bye, John. All right, with that, does anybody else have any questions or comments for Ben? Okay. In that case, just a reminder, please, if you get a chance, do look over the PR itself so that Ben can try to address all your questions and concerns offline, and then we can have a more discussion next week. Okay. Cool. Ben, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we move on?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
And I'm wondering. Okay, yeah, I think we're good. I'll get back to you all. And it might not even be an issue now that I think about it. I might have went down a wrong rabbit hole. But yeah, let me invest, let me think about it, let me organize my thoughts, and I'll definitely get back to you all in the PR.
Okay. Sounds good. Cool. And thank you for writing this up. Appreciate it. All right. With that, I think the rest of it is just normal noise we can ignore. So does anybody else have any topics they'd like to bring up for the agenda before we adjourn? Going once. Okay, I think I have everybody for the attendee list. Speak now if I missed you. All right, cool. With that, we are done. Thank you all, and we'll talk again next week. Have a good week and weekend, everybody.